Hey everyone, I just wanted to remind you that we have the Apple Valley Home Group coming this Friday again at 6:30, and we're going to dive into chapter 1 of Philippians. And so what I wanted to do, and hope this isn't too nerdy for you guys, but the context of Philippians is really important, and not wanting to waste the time that we have to jump into chapter 1, I kind of wanted to read some notes that I had on the context of Philippians. And so if y'all can nerd out with me for a minute and just let me read some of these notes, and that way when we get together Friday night, we're going to read through chapter 1 together, and then we can dialogue around it. And but knowing the context is going to help us to understand it a little bit more of who Paul is, where he's at, and kind of what's going down in this particular situation and this letter that Paul writes to the church there at Philippi. And so the first thing is just, let's remember who Paul is. This guy was evil, pure evil before his conversion. And if you want to read a little bit more about that, you can go back to Acts 7, Acts 8, and kind of read about his conversion, kind of who he was. He was there when Stephen, the first martyr, was stoned to death. They said they laid the coats at a young man named Saul, and Saul approved of everything that was going on when Stephen's getting stoned to death. And then he went on to ravage the church, as Acts tells us a little bit about. So this was a very mean guy, very cruel, but very intellectually brilliant guy. He was a Pharisee, and so that's kind of who he was, very educated, and wanted to keep the Jewish laws for them. And so he ravaged the church, the Christian church, and just sought to rip families apart. He went door to door seeking who believed in Jesus, and he would throw them into prison. They would persecute them. And so that's kind of who this was. Let's not forget that, because sometimes we can say we forget who Saul was because we look at Paul so much. He's the same person, just with a name change. And but this was a brutal guy. This guy was terrible. And even in Acts 9, we read that after his conversion, he didn't eat or drink or do anything for a while, for 3 days. And some people are like, oh yeah, he was fasting to go into ministry. That's not what was happening. This guy was depressed. He was hurt that now he had just had Jesus appear to him. And now he's like, man, I've been persecuting innocent blood this whole time. And so he has had 3 days of just probably depression as I read the text. And so just kind of remember who he is and kind of what's going on there. And then kind of the work that Jesus did in his life. The city of Philippi, we can look at the maps in the Bible. Maybe some of you have never done that, but we can do that and see where Philippi is. It's in modern day Greece. It was a major city during the time. Paul arrived there probably 49 BC-ish. It's always really hard to tell the time. And so that's kind of where Philippi is. It was a major city. It was along the major trade routes, commercial trade routes from the Roman Empire all the way into the seas and stuff to the major coastlines there. And so you can, again, nerd out, look at the maps, do all that kind of stuff in your Bible to kind of see what was going on. Paul's kind of his thing was he would plant these churches in these major areas, so there'd be a lot of traffic coming in or coming right past Philippi. Philippi was a lot like Victorville. We get a lot of traffic going from LA to Vegas. It's kind of what Philippi was, and so they would see a lot of traffic like that. And so moving forward, Paul was in prison when he wrote this letter. This is one of his prison epistles, as it's talked about. He was either in prison in one of 3 places. It's kind of hard to know exactly where he was at. He was either Rome, Ephesus, or Caesarea. Those are the 3 main prisons. The chances are he was probably in Rome based on some of the information we have, which we can look at. There's palace guards there, as he'll refer to when we get into chapter 1, 2, and 3. Acts 28 also refers to it. And so Rome was the major prison. Chances are that's kind of probably where he was. And so real quick as I finish up, the purpose of Philippians, there's no need to assume up front that there was only one purpose to this book. As we read, There seems to be several objectives here that the Apostle Paul kind of keeps in mind as he is communicating with this church. First, it's clear Paul wanted the church to know how things were going for him in prison. He addresses his condition as he's in prison. Second, there appears to be some discord and division in the church, and so the apostle writes to encourage humility within them and to be unified, because there's a lot of division going on as well. Third, Paul, a pastoral theologian, writes to head off negative teaching and consequence of certain false teachers. And so he's writing to kind of correct some of the theology that's creeping into this church here at Philippi. Fourth, he wrote to commend Timothy to the church as well, to give the church a report about the health and plans of Epaphroditus. And so he's sending Timothy to the church, who is kind of his spiritual son as well. And so this is a really unique book, often referred to as like the coffee cup verse, because there's so many verses in here that we have on coffee cups and t-shirts as Christian people. And so there's a lot of good verses in here. And so we'll get to jump into some of those. And so that's kind of a brief context. Again, when I taught this Bible study, I spent 2 weeks just on this stuff. So this was a good little 6-minute video. Hope it does you guys well. Again, Friday night, 6:30, we're going to be at the Jones. We're going to hang out, fellowship, share a meal, bring some food. We'll have potluck together. And then sometime when the time feels right, we'll all get together, the adults in the TV fellowship room. I don't know. It's fellowship room. That's kind of a church term, but this is a house. But kind of the family room there. And we'll just talk. We'll read through all chapter 1. Maybe I'll share a couple of bullet points, and then I'd like for us to dialogue around that. So anyways, guys, we look forward. It's going to be a fun week, fun time at home group, and we look forward to seeing you guys there later.